I've been practicing yoga on my rooftop terrace for the past few months, as it has amazing sunrise views and helps me start my day peacefully. Yesterday, I received a formal notice from our HOA stating that someone complained about my inappropriate public displays and disturbance of community aesthetics. I was shocked since I practice at 6 a.m. when hardly anyone is awake, wear completely normal workout clothes, and make zero noise. When I asked for clarification, the HOA manager reluctantly admitted that my neighbor, who I've never even spoken to, submitted photos of me in various poses claiming they were inappropriate for children to potentially see and promoting Eastern religious practices in a family community. I'm literally just doing basic vinyasa flow. My story, shared, sparked a wave of reactions from a community of strangers who rallied to her defense, offering advice, outrage, and creative solutions. Their responses painted a vivid picture of solidarity, legal insight, and defiance against overreach and intolerance. One commenter urged to challenge the HOA's authority. Ask them to point to where it states in the HOA bylaws that have your signature that you are forbidden from using your own terrace for exercise. People can complain about whatever they want. The HOA cannot actually cite you unless it goes directly against the HOA bylaws. That is the exact copy that you signed, not some updated copy they just manufactured to suddenly include yoga. Also, file a complaint in return for your neighbor peeping and inappropriately staring over into my property, which makes you very uncomfortable to use your own backyard. And if it continues, I will be forced to file a police report. See how quickly this gets squashed. Signed, someone else who lives in a HOA. Another suggested a playful act of collective resistance. I'm petty, but it would be great if all the neighbors who support you would also go out on their terraces at 6 a.m. and do some yoga, step aerobics, light resistance training, whatever, for a few weeks, just to stick it to Nosy Nelly. Just a thought. Someday, please. Another suggested a playful act of collective resistance. I'm petty, but it would be great if all the neighbors who support you would also go out on their terraces at 6 a.m. and do some yoga or step aerobics / light resistance training, whatever, for a few weeks, just to stick it to Nosy Nelly. Just a thought. The invasion of privacy struck a chord with many. One user shared a similar experience. Exactly this. It's creepy that they're looking at OP and taking photos. I had a neighbor complain about being able to see my trash cans on my patio, even though she could only see them if she climbed to the top of a small hill and looked down into my backyard. I got a warning notice from my HOA about visible trash cans with photos she had taken. Felt pretty violating. My response? I bought a neon pink tarp and threw it over the cans so they would no longer be visible. I figured if she was going to look down into my yard and look for things to complain about, I'd give her something to look at. Ha! The accusation of promoting Eastern religious practices ignited a firestorm of commentary on religious freedom. One person noted, "If that whole promoting Eastern religion subscribe thing is an exact quote, I feel like that right there is your ticket to fight. They can't just outlaw religious practices." Another added, "The Hindu American Foundation can offer legal advice and guidance, even if you're not a Hindu or intent on practicing yoga for the purpose of expressing anything other than pay homage to its origins." The fact that the HOA explicitly forwarded an act of religious discrimination as a basis of the complaint is something they need to be walked back from very clearly. Lawyers love these kinds of suits. Here in the SF Bay Area, where Indians are a well-off and politically enabled minority, this sort of thing would early have the HOA in a lot of trouble. There's a separate matter of the neighbor invading your privacy, which OP can target both through legal means and in the court of public opinion. The absurdity of the complaint was not lost on the community. Wow. Promoting Eastern religious practices? You would think you were doing human sacrifices on the rooftop. Not that I think that's part of any Eastern religion. The HOA should be backing you up on this, one user exclaimed. Another pointed out, some Christians think yoga is the devil. You should also mention that even if it was a religious practice, instead of exercise, we have freedom of religion in this country, supposedly, so they would be discriminating on the basis of religion. Legal arguments surfaced repeatedly. I'd note that federal and most state law expressly prohibit discriminating against someone in housing on the basis of religion, one commenter wrote. The evangelicals love laws like this, so that they can do all the public religious displays their heart desires. Ignoring Matthew 6:5-6. So tell your HOA to talk to their lawyer. That'll shut this down in a single breath. They'll be hurting 6 ways from Sunday if they deny you your religious freedoms. Of course, I know that many people don't view yoga as religion, but the fact that they have already identified it as such completely screws them. Lean into the fact it could be religious practice. That is why they cannot ban it. The double standard of religious expression was also called out. Unless it clearly has a rule that prevents you from using your terrace for certain purposes, this is discrimination for your religious practice. I'd love to ask them if this means they'll be issuing a notice that any religious holiday decorations, including Xmas trees and lights, will also not be allowed visible to other neighbors. I'm sorry, because this has to really dampen the experience you're enjoying. Knowing the neighbor is being a creep and secretly watching you and taking photos kinda ruins the vibe. Maybe the terrace can have a privacy wall that you unfold to block their view. HOAs, as many pointed out, often breed petty conflicts. HOAs are generally terrible because they often have a petty tyrant, and they tend to involve signing away rights. One user lamented. Please consult a lawyer. They can target you, fining you repeatedly for infractions if they're inclined, and you may need to threaten a suit to get them to back off. We had to do this, and we'll never live in a condo again. We also got cited for having a Buddha and plants on our porch, because miserable people are going to wage whatever wars they can. Practical solutions emerged alongside the outrage. Wow, unbelievable. Your neighbor sounds unwell and intrusive, putting it mildly, one commenter wrote. Practicing on your rooftop terrace must be absolutely wonderful. I'm sorry your neighbor has intruded upon and disrupted a lovely morning ritual. We needed some privacy on our porch without blocking light and views. I found some 6-foot-high, decorative metalwork panels on Etsy that incorporate cutouts to allow light and views, with just enough metal to obscure others from having a clear view of us. I hope you won't need to do anything like that. But if you need some screening to get back your sense of peace, there are some nice options out there. An HOA board member weighed in with authority. An HOA cannot discriminate on the basis of religion or perceived religion. That's a big civil rights offense, and the type of thing the ACLU will actually go after. I'd write back and point out, 1. There is no bylaw against what you're doing. 2. They're engaging in religious discrimination, which is a violation of federal law. Insist that they remove the record of the violation letter from your account and send you confirmation that has been done. Source: I'm an HOA board member of a reasonable HOA and fired the property manager that sent a violation letter to homeowners putting up lights for Diwali when we allow lights for Christmas and Halloween. Others emphasized HOA's constitutional protections. I'd also talk to the HOA about your constitutional right to practice the religion of your choice, including Eastern religious practices. Restricting that is discrimination and a violation of your civil rights. There is nothing inappropriate about your poses, especially when done in workout clothes. Now, if you were doing it nude, that would be another issue. You are not breaking any laws, nor are you violating community aesthetics. Exercise and worship practices. Even though you aren't worshiping, yoga is a worship practice for some, that aren't violating noise ordinances are well in keeping with community standards. Point out that it's well within HOA standards. The HOA should have told your neighbor to mind their own business. The neighbor's photography raised legal concerns. What's worse, a person exercising on their property or a neighbor taking photos of said person on private property without their consent? One user asked. I'd ask them where it says in your contract that yoga is not allowed or exercise, while also letting them know if your neighbor continues photographing you on private property without consent, you'll be forced to call the police and file a report. The normalcy of yoga in modern culture was a recurring theme. How many ads on TV show people practicing yoga? A gazillion, one commenter remarked. You can buy yoga mats and props at Target. Do they complain about that? Last time I checked, we are guaranteed freedom of religion in this country. I would assume that covers physical movements tangentially connected to Hinduism. So, you could do basic stretching and calisthenics, and that'd be okay by them? Ridiculous. Super jealous of your Surya Namaskar situation. Hope you get this sorted. Some advocated for escalation. Chuckles. The neighborhood pervert took photos of me, claimed I was behaving inappropriately, and then actively encouraged others to view said inappropriate behavior photos. One user fumed. It is time to call cops for stalking, harassment, creepy behavior, and call that person out by name. Everyone should know who they are and what they did. Scorch the earth. Look, I am normally not one to make waves, but I'll burn everything when it comes to entitled and invasive tomfuckery. Questions about the terrace's status arose. Is it your private terrace or the common area? Roof terrace. Not that it would seem to matter because yoga is an ancient practice, and this neighbor could be infringing on your right to worship in whatever manner you choose. How dare they reprimand you for this? It seems discriminatory. Sorry this is happening. Don't let it distress you. You could also hang a privacy curtain. Something flowy and private could be a nice vibe. Protect yourself from their gaze. An industry insider offered perspective. My hubby, who built an over 55 community and set up and dealt with their HOA, said the following. Unless she is performing nude, pornographic, obscene, or salacious, etc. exercise, the HOA has no control over her. He advised, telling the HOA as well as sending a response to the nosy resident, that the peeping and photographing is depriving you of the use and enjoyment of your own property, and if this continues, you will file a police report. Also, tell the HOA that the statement of promoting Eastern religious practices in a family community could very well instigate a suit of religious intolerance against the HOA. The legal peril for the HOA was clear. Eastern religious practices. First, yoga is not. But, second, so what? One user wrote. The HOA could easily lose a lawsuit over freedom of religion. As for a fully clothed person working out, how do we get to the decency issues from that? Again, HOA has nothing in the bylaws that would come close to covering either one of these complaints. So HOA needs to send you a written apology with a letter back to the complainant that these complaints are not covered in HOA bylaws. Otherwise, they could easily lose a lawsuit on both. Bono. A suggested letter encapsulated the community's advice. Dear HOA person, thank you for making me aware that one of my neighbors is practicing their voyeurism on me, as well as their attempts at religious persecution. Please point out where in the bylaws of our HOA that outdoor recreation and/or exercise is prohibited. Please point out in the bylaws that this community is restricted to or of any specific religion. Also, thank you for advising me which neighbor is trying to restrict my activities and beliefs. I will be consulting with my attorney regarding these issues to ensure that my rights are protected with regard to both the HOA and said neighbor. Sincerely, OP. Cultural reflections emerged too. I'm sorry this is happening to you, one user wrote. The whole thing reminds me of an epiphany I had while doing yoga at home in my living room. I thought of social studies textbook images of people in Asia, on mats in a city center, deeply kneeling, praying to a lone figure standing up on stage. My epiphany was, these people were doing child's pose in the photos, and the guy on stage was probably the instructor. They weren't worshiping another person. They were worshiping themselves and doing it together. They were doing yoga. Anyways, I live in Florida, where our governor is proudly anti-woke, and people love him. I could see a Floridian getting offended over someone doing yoga at 6 a.m. for sure. They cannot mind their own business, especially with something they don't understand. Encouragement to stay strong was abundant. "Wow, the audacity of your neighbor," one commenter exclaimed. As others have said, I agree it's best to advocate for yourself in an assertive and calm way. Bring curiosity about the action and demonstrate the power of yoga in your presence and speech. This is what the yamas and niyamas are for. Good luck, internet stranger. Privacy laws were cited as a defense. Invasion of privacy is a tort based in common law, allowing an aggrieved party to bring a lawsuit against an individual who unlawfully intrudes into their private affairs, one user explained. The castle doctrine equates a private home to a castle, private and not accessible without permission of the owner. This includes peering under, over, around, or into any barrier. Taking a photo of a private citizen in a private location is not permissible in most jurisdictions, except with a special permit or explicit permission. Some urged immediate action. Call the police on your neighbor for stalking and harassment. The neighbor took surreptitious photos of you. Take a video of your yoga practice so the cops can see that you are fully clothed and entirely appropriate. Tell that pearl-clutching, puritanical old busybody to get bent. Personal stories of transformation through yoga added depth. This neighbor is balking, probably conservative Christianity stuff, fear of Eastern religion, one user speculated. I've taken up meditation and mindfulness. What my mother would worry is me giving the devil a foothold. I am actually learning ways to finally help me think better. Does it work for you? Does it improve the outcome of your day? Do you need to erect a large cardboard wall that shields you and tells your neighbor, "Quit staring at my butt, you creep. I am exercising and enjoying the sunrise and the birdsongs"? The HOA's misstep was seen as a legal Achilles heel. So if they have you that in writing, they've just cooked themselves with that promoting Eastern religious practices bit, one user noted. That's straight up infringement on your freedom of religion. Just let them know that their actions infringe on your freedom of religion and that you are prepared to speak to a lawyer about a possible discrimination suit, and I bet they back right off. Defiance was a common sentiment. I'd fight that one, so long as you are not naked up there or really indecently dressed, one commenter wrote. I know of no HOA that limits what kind of legitimate exercise you can do on your own property, and then I'd be up there 5x a day. Racial undertones were also addressed. So he's an asshole and a racist. Check. One user wrote. Tell them you've been in contact with a lawyer and have grounds for both harassment, invasion of privacy, and racial discrimination. The only way to respond with an HOA is to be calm, logical, structured, and most importantly, call them on their BS. Reframing yoga as exercise was suggested. Maybe don't refer to it as yoga when discussing it with the HOA. This is simply stretching and calisthenics. In addition to what others have said, this is a good opportunity to practice Zen and nonviolent resistance at the same time. Ha ha! Zen in yo face. So, an ex-HOA president offered blunt advice. Ask for the contact information of their lawyer and inform them that infringement upon your Eastern religious practices is a civil rights violation, and you are not above taking all involved parties to court in order to protect your rights. That should be enough to stop this. Honestly, HOAs are the worst at attracting power-hungry mini-fascists. Cultural misunderstandings were lamented. Growing up in the Midwest, I was always surrounded by devout Christians, one user shared. I'll never forget in college hearing from one of my friends that her daughter's school was teaching meditation to the kids in school. She told me she had to pull her daughter out because demonic forces may take over their body. It's really a shame that people live believing wild shit like this. See. Finally, the Fair Housing Act was invoked. HOAs are required to follow the Fair Housing Act, which prohibits discrimination based on religion, so you could go after them for damages for the whole Eastern religious practices part. This story is a call to action, to stand boldly for our rights, to challenge unjust overreach, and to protect the sanctity of our private spaces. Let my sunrise flows inspire us all to rise above intolerance, reclaim our freedom, and continue pursuing what brings us balance, unapologetically. If you've been through something like this, like the video and drop your story in the comments.